Yeah, Professor Adesegun Fatusi is the next speaker. What innovations should we be looking for, or should we be looking at for medical education given the new realities? The objectives of this session is to pour new wine into old wineskin, as it will result in the loss of both the wine and the wineskin, sadly. In light of the new realities, our medical education cannot remain as it is, as it has always been. There has to be a restructuring, otherwise we will face challenges ill prepared. This session aims to prepare our minds on the manner of men we ought to become, even as God's light in the world. So we do not lose relevance. It will also aim at to cause us to rise out of our old ways of thinking and doing things into the needed things for the new. Now, Professor Fatuki graduated from Abafomi Awolowo University in 1987 with a Bachelor of Medicine, Bachelor of Surgery degree, with distinction in community health and the Lawrence Omole Award for the best graduating student in community health. He obtained a Master's of Public Health from Hebrew University, Hadassah, Israel. He became a fellow of the West African College of Physicians in 1995. He's a professor of community medicine and public health, as well as honorary consultant physician at the Abafomi Awolowo University Teaching Hospital. Within the university, he has served as head of department, director of population and reproductive health programs, director of Institute of Public Health, and provost of the College of Health Sciences. He is currently the Vice Chancellor of the University of Medical Sciences, Ondo State. He has served and continues to serve the country in various capacities in public health, particularly leading the development of national policy documents in the areas of adolescent health and youth development, HIV, AIDS, sexual and reproductive health, and mental health. He was a member of the ministerial committee that developed Nigeria Health Sector Reform Program in 2014 and the technical working group for the new national health policy developed in 2016. He is the president of Society of Adolescent and Young People's Health in Nigeria and currently chairs Nigeria National Technical Working Committee on Adolescent Health and Development. He is the founder of Campus Health and Rise Initiative and CEO of Pioneer, an adolescent youth-focused organization. Prof is also the esteemed Vice President, Sub-Saharan Africa for the International Association for Adolescent Health. He is a seasoned researcher. He has worked as a lead research consultant for several national and international organizations, including joining the Gottmacher Institute in 2019 as Director of International Research. Fatusi has received several recognitions and awards as he has served as a consultant to numerous international organizations, including World Health Organization and all the rest. He won the Federal Government Award as the best candidate in Part 1 examination of the Faculty of Public Health, National Postgraduate Medical College of Nigeria in 1992. He has obtained the Summa Cum Laude honors as well as the best graduating student. I present to you a professor of community health, specialized in adolescent health, the current Vice Chancellor, and a man that has gone through the ranks in the university system. And I know God has prepared him to educate us on what innovations we should be looking out for, or we should be looking out for medical education, given the new realities. Welcome, Professor Adesegun Fatusi.
Thank you very much, sir. Good evening, brethren. It's an honor and privilege to be here. I want to thank my brother for introducing me. I'm sure if I had introduced myself, I would just have told you my name is Adesegun Fatusi, a proud member of CMDA, and I'm glad that together we can be having this opportunity to chat. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we give you praise. Thank you for who you have made us in you, because without you, we are nothing and we can do nothing. But thank you for what you have made us to be, people that belongs to your kingdom, people you have called to serve in the medical field and to serve in various ways. We ask that, Lord, as we chat together tonight, as we interact together tonight, let your spirit flow to grant us wisdom and understanding. In the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Thank you, Abba Father. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Again, it's a great privilege to be here, and I want to thank the leadership of CMDA for this great opportunity. I'm going to be sharing my screen as I start now. So my topic, as I've now announced, is what innovation should we be looking at for medical education given the COVID-19 reality? I want to start by saying that first, it is important to understand where we are, so that in doing that, we can then begin to look at where we should be going. And I'm going to try and make this as practical as I can, particularly when I come to talk about what we should be doing differently in these 45 minutes. Firstly, I would like us to look at the unfinished agenda, because before COVID-19 came on, there were challenges on the ground. The COVID-19 had not reiterated those realities, but rather it has brought on new realities. So I'm going to talk about the fundamental issues, which I call the unfinished challenges, talk about the current realities and the new challenges they pose, and finally, talk about, as we go forward, thinking around what should we do differently and how we should do them differently. I'm going to focus on how should we redefine priorities and address the challenges that we face as we go on. So let's start with those fundamental challenges. I always like, every time I talk around, and I talk around university, around training, around development, I always remind myself of these quotes from Stefan Collini in his book titled, What Are Universities For? And he made a mark that I think is important to focus on as to why do we do this training? What exactly is the purpose? Like, as always said, when purpose is not understood, abuse is inevitable. So what's the whole purpose? For me, I believe strongly that despite the changing dimensions of the era, the core purpose of the higher education setting of which medical education fall remains unchanged. Let me quote him. He said, I work in the knowledge and human resource industry. My company specializes in two kinds of products. We manufacture, number one, high quality multi-skilled units of human capacity. High quality multi-skilled units of human capacity. And we produce commercially relevant cutting edge knowledge. So if you bring medical education to its bear, it's about getting those individuals we are producing to truly be people who are the cutting edge of their skills and who can make the desired difference in our society, not just in the small world of medicine, but in the bigger side. And at the same time, we are contributing to knowledge to improve things, to change the dynamics of understanding and impact. So I want us to bear that in mind as a guiding light, that this is all about, in a lot of ways, when we bring all the results together, it's about producing people who are high human capacity and a cutting edge knowledge. As we look around the medical education, it is important to look at it in a holistic context. And there are three ways I think three things we must bear together. Number one is the challenges that we face that arise from the fact that we are set, particularly in Nigeria, in a particular national setting. Of course, there's also the global setting. And there are issues that pertain to higher education specifically. And thirdly, there are issues that dovetail really into the medical and health platform. I will not spend so much time on this because I want to focus my attention more on define the priorities for the future and what should we do. But I just want to lay this foundation because it's important for us to all see the problem in a common way so that we can then apply our heart to addressing them in a particular way. So let's look at it. A couple of years back, the Anti-Corruption Academy, which is the training arm of the ICPC, with NUC, produced a report that cut across the educational sector in Nigeria, looking at what challenges and issues are. And there are 4 kind of elements that I saw in that report, or the way I've summarized. Number 1 is about teaching activities and the quality. Again and again, that report pointed out to the fact that teachers continuously, or a high proportion of teachers, are not paying attention to quality. They showed examples where teachers teach just from old notes. They take old notes to just dictate. They check responsibility in terms of coming to class and how often they do that and all that and all that. And I'm sure that for many of us here, we probably have experienced that. I always remember an experience in my medical school where we had one old teacher who was teaching us a particular subject. It's one of the basic subjects. And he would be dictating this note, which I guess was what he got from his PhD class, wherever he trained. And the terms, some of the organisms, the names have changed. And this man was oblivious because he was just not focusing on the quality. And so one of the issues around the Nigerian education system, including the medical education, is about teaching activities in terms of quality. Second issue is about governance system. But there are several compromises and there's inadequate monitoring of activities, teaching activities, research activities within the sector. And 3 is the realm, I believe that no brethren names will be mentioned, the issue of unhealthy relationships. Of course, some of us had, in recent times, we had all the scandal that happened around marks and sex for marks scandal, money for marks scandal. That's one other issue that was focused on. Number 4 is about inadequacy of facilities. We must continue to remember that these challenges are with us, even before the COVID era. And COVID has brought in an additional dimension, and we must look at how to solve not just the new problems, but also to address the persistent problem that had existed before COVID-19. When you talk around concerns in higher education, the classical framework that many people will talk about in the education sector is the Nigaveka Pentagon. When they talk about 5 problems with higher education, or 5 issues that we must continue to struggle with in terms of higher education. One of them is about access. And I believe that one of the greatest challenges within higher education sector happens with the medical education, because access is a huge problem. Most medical schools have very little number. To finish medical school and get into residency is a big challenge because the spaces are small. So access will always be an issue. There's the issue of cost, the issue of relevance. How relevant are the curricula to current challenges that we face? And I will talk a little bit more about that. There's also issue about the governance structure, and ultimately the issue of cost. Like I said, I don't want to spend much time on this. I just want to leave them as background that we must all continue to remember as issues we must struggle with as we continue to try to move from where we are to where we must be. So when you think about the medical environment in particular, there are 2 dimensions of problems we can talk about. One has to do with the instructional deficiencies or challenges, and the other has to do with the institutional deficiencies. In terms of instructional deficiencies, one of the major challenges that you see across medical schools in Nigeria is the fact that curricula are rather rigid and are not responsive to changing dynamics. I often joke with people that one area of education within the university system that is particularly very rigid is the medical education. There seems to be a belief that the way it has always been is the way it must always be. Doctors, educationists seem to be particularly resistant to changes and to how to do things in different ways. But we cannot continue that way as we move forward. Perhaps the most striking effort at changing medical curricula in this country has been the experiment that Professor Adesegun, late Grillo, made in Ife, where he had a different kind of curriculum and all that. At the end of the day, because it was new, because others find it difficult to adopt, they eventually killed the curriculum. We must be thinking of how can we innovate to respond better to challenges, particularly in the COVID-19 era and the post-COVID-19 era. I don't understand. I've seen a message from, hello, I see a message from the host. Is there any problem? Okay, all right, thanks. So if you bring all this together, I would like to bring all the points I've made together in this quote that was that I pulled out from the Commission on Global Education around Health Professional Education. And they said, put all this together. I'm sorry, I have to go back to this because something came up from the old that interfered with this. I was talking about non-responsive rigid curriculum. That was where I was. The second issue is about gaps in curricular delivery and what World Bank refers to as static pedagogy. So one of the problems in medical school across board in this country is that while the professors or the teachers are subject experts, the issue about the science of teaching had never figured very strongly in our teaching in medical education. Very few teachers had gone through specific training around how to teach. It is great to be a specialist, but that does not make you a specialist teacher. And that's one of the issues that we face today, and we must continue to see how we overcome. The third issue is about the fact that our curriculum many times are just being imported awesomely from other contexts without enough adaptation to our local context, particularly when we look at things around the socioeconomic context of our people and how we address issues. We must think more and more around our local context. Virtually all health professionals will be aware of the struggle we have around professional rivalries, the silos, not just between doctors and others, but even between specialists within the medical field, which sometimes is the reason why we have our curriculum overloaded, because everyone is struggling for time. Everybody wants to show how important the subject is, rather than thinking about the outcome that we are all working at in terms of producing high quality doctors and professionals. There's also the old issues around abuses and ethical compromises in training. And I would like to just talk about this a little bit. And when I'm talking about abuse here, I'm not talking about the more criminal issues, but even abuses that happen within interrelationships, how we address each other, how consultants will address resident doctors in a very degrading way, in a way that touch on self-esteem, how they will address medical students in a way that just tear down their dignity and their confidence in themselves. Those are part of the issues that we have in terms of our instructional deficiencies today. But there are also institutional deficiencies, including facility issues, including issues relating to training resources. There are issues about good governance and monitoring within the system as to performance of various players and stakeholders within that system. And also there is the issue about a poorly calibrated reward system. You know, one of the things that often intrigue me is the fact that I find it interesting that, for example, people want to go on strike for 30 days, for 60 days, and yet they expect their salary will be paid for the period they have not been there. Of course, you can always argue about that. Oh, did government do what is right? But sometimes it's just interesting to listen to the argument around those issues, or look at the reward system that does not seem to understand that you need to reward people according to contribution, but rather it is a flat system that is uniform, that hardly recognizes specific abilities, specific contributions, and all that. And so at the end of the day, everyone is rated the same, graded the same, rewarded the same, because the system has not been adequately calibrated to reward excellence. And where you don't recognize excellence, where you don't celebrate excellence, it is difficult for excellence to flourish in such systems. And so all that together brings me to this quote from the Global Commission around health professional education, that a slow burning crisis is emerging in terms of the fact that we are seeing a mismatch of professional competencies to patients and population priorities because of fragmentary, outdated, and static curricula that are producing ill-equipped graduates from under-financed institutions. This quote was from a global study, but it applies, as far as I know, very strongly to Nigeria, because everything that's said there, fragmentary, outdated, static curricula, apply in many dimensions to us. And again, our graduates increasingly, they begin to see that the quality of graduates we are producing is getting compromised by and by. And of course, our institutions are underfinanced, without resources, and therefore they are not able to perform as maximally as they will. And all this will be affected by COVID. And all these are being affected by COVID. And we need to respond to all this as we go forward. So let's talk about the current realities. What are the COVID-19 challenges? What challenges do we have newly? I want to look at that in two broad ways. Number one, COVID had brought broad-scale institutional disruption. There was a World Bank study where they had put together their findings around what had happened globally in educational institutions. And this is one of the points they've made, which is totally true, that today the institutions have been broadly disrupted. Take away the private schools, or perhaps a few state schools. Virtually all federal universities today are grounded. Nothing is happening. No online teaching, nothing. So there's been this broad-scale institutional disruption. Number two, the effect of COVID had also affected people, staff and students in different ways, not only social-emotionally, but also physical health. We've had cases of professors who have died in this unfortunate pandemic. Students have been affected in different ways, and a lot of health workers, particularly health teachers in the state where I work, we have had a lot of health workers, some of whom are teachers, admitted for COVID-19. But thankfully, the mortality rate is low. But that is one effect. You can't expect a teacher who is affected to, of course, continue to function in that state of poor until he recovers fully. So it has that toll on the system. And it has also displaced students. They are everywhere. And many campus services and support have ceased because students are not around, and that affects income, it affects relationships, in fact, it affects the totality of the university environment. And there's a whole issue about technical resources. When I came back into the country in March, and this whole issue happened, and I was in touch with the guys I was working with in the US, we had very minimal impact on the work I was doing, the research team I was working with before coming back. Because prior to COVID-19, a lot of our researchers were working from different parts of the world. So we are used to working with technology resources, doing our meetings on Zoom, doing all our activities online. And for them, it was not a big issue because they had the resources, they were set up, they had started. But for many universities in the US and the UK, they switched on to online teaching in a matter of days and sometimes weeks. But for many of our institutions till today, majority of our institutions are still not being able to switch. Why? Because technical resources are totally inadequate. And we have not been able to gear ourselves, our mindset to come into that realm. But that cannot continue as we go forward in this COVID-19 era and beyond. The other issues about maintaining instructional operations. Coursework has been disrupted, exams have been disrupted, clinical teachings have been disrupted, and there's also been disruption of research activities. Students who are carrying out their final year, students who are doing community-based studies, for example, can go back into the community now, and a lot of that is also happening to many lecturers. And there are also issues about partnership operations. For many of the schools who have partners, particularly in international development world, there have been a lot of downgrading of activities, downgrading of resources. So this has affected us in a significant way in the immediate era. But there are also long-term challenges that we must continue to do, we will struggle against. Of course, many of the things we're talking about, we will not know the full extent until the couple of years to come. But a couple of things that seem obvious, even from where we are sitting today. Number one, for many schools, for example, I work in University of Medical Sciences, where our government doesn't pay the salary of teachers, but other government will give you a subvention and expect you to raise the rest of your money, internal resources, to generate some internal fund to complement your fund to pay salaries. Without schooling, with schooling grounded, automatically ability to generate fund reduce significantly. And that will have effect not just on today, but on tomorrow, because we are going to go into tomorrow with deficit budgeting. And so that's going to impact on things. And many schools will probably be looking at the potential of even increasing cost of schooling, which again will touch on parents. Many parents have not earned money in the COVID era. Many have gotten their salaries slashed. So this is going to be a circle of events that we have to deal with. Reduce institutional funding, cost of schooling, its impact on access, its impact on parents' ability to pay, and all that, and all that, and all that. The other issue is about resource investment implications. Going forward, every serious school knows that it must invest more on technology. And take that from starting from a point where your income is reducing, and yet you need to invest more in technology. And I'm not just talking about computer training, even for materials in our physiology and pharmacology. There are now there are computer models that you can use for teaching and for training. And so we need to invest in all this in the face of less resources being generated. There's also an impact on our training program design and channel. One of the things that I know people have resisted for long is to do things like online teaching, but that is going to change forever. It's going to just change forever. We've always talked about dual teaching or distance learning as substandard in a way. Again, that's going to change, because now we know that in the post-COVID-19 era, you have to design your program differently. You have to be able to think about the channels of delivery differently, and you have to think about being competitive even as you do that. So we have to think around this training program design and channels in a different way, and this will be a long-term effect. It's going to change the face of education and medical education in many ways. And also issues about criteria and competency that we require for studentship. We have gotten to an era where you cannot just be a student in a higher institution in this age without some computer competencies. And increasingly, I can see that universities will begin to look at that competency beyond JAMB exams or UTM exams to begin to define other things that they think they need for their students. I remember in a meeting in my school, somebody was talking about the fact that, some students will not have money to buy computers, some students will not have money to do online, to buy data. And I said, you know what? Life is changing. Without a computer, then that student cannot be a student in certain institutions, or it can be in other institutions. So in other words, even those kind of competencies will begin to make students shift for which kind of school they can go, because certain schools will be placing extra demand on competencies and some equipment that they think will be important for their students to go. And of course, that will affect the dynamic of choice of school. Just this afternoon, I met a colleague of mine with his daughter, and I was asking them where they're coming from. And he said, I brought my daughter to do exam. They're in my office, we're doing the exam, the school is doing exam. That school has finished the semester, they're doing the exam, but many other schools have not even gone 1 inch forward in the educational program since March. And so as parents listen to some of these issues, they begin to ask themselves, which school should I truly put my child, knowing the challenges that things like COVID-19 might bring. And because we don't know what the future will bring. We're seeing COVID-19 today, the challenge that the likelihood that something else will come forward cannot be ruled out. And so this will affect the school population, the dynamic of school choices, and many decisions that parents and students will be making going forward. Let me move on to where I hope I can spend the most part of my time, about defining priorities and addressing challenges. And I would like to be as practical here as possible. I want to spend some time on this particular slide because for me, the question we must ask is, does COVID-19 present us with more challenge than opportunities, or more opportunities than challenges? For me, I had come to the conclusion that COVID-19, when it comes to the education system, is a blessing in disguise if only we can truly latch onto the opportunities. And this is what I want to focus on around what you might call innovations, but I would rather call them right now the opportunities that we need to latch onto. Number one, we have moved into a realm of new normal for every serious medical educationist. Every serious leader in the education sector must recognize that there is a new normal. I have said to my students, I said to my staff, for example, at the end of COVID-19, don't think that online teaching will stop in our university. No, it has become part and parcel of what we must continue to do. Recording your materials, making them available to students so that they can go and access it when they want, when they like, to complement whatever you can do in teaching. And so there's a new normal, and that's a great opportunity. A new normal where you can learn, where you can drive learning with technology. A new normal where we can do things very differently. Number two is the whole issue about, let me go back to number one. I want to spend a few minutes here. One of the questions that we must ask is to say, the way we teach, is it compulsory that must be the way? Let me give you an example. In our medical schools, we will have anatomy dissection, and therefore we will dissect the bodies so that we can locate the various anatomical parts. Okay? Must that continue to be? Must it continue to be, we must get body to dissect and dissect it, and then next year look for another body? Are there other approaches? Plastination, for example. Are there mechanisms to use technology to drive this? Is there a way to use technology to drive the whole issue around pharmacology or around physiology that can give students the same level of knowledge or even better level of understanding than they do? Are these issues that we will be open to examining and to be questioning? And so we must look at that platform in terms of what are the delivery channels that are best for different things. When you think around the whole issue of clinical skill laboratory, if we have very good clinical skill laboratory, how will it have helped students about this kind of time as against when it is just learning from live patients in the world? I am not saying we must not learn from live patients. I'm not saying anatomy is not, dissection is not. I'm saying these are questions we must begin to ask, to say, how do we bring technology to enhance the learning that we are doing? And that takes me to number two. Re-examine our curricula, activities versus competencies. So the question here for me, and this I talk about innovating our processes. The question here for me is that when students are doing experiments, for example, are we focused on activities or are we focused on what exactly should they learn? So let me rephrase that. Like I asked a teacher in my school, I said, when you ask a student to mix chemicals together, is it the process of mixing the chemical that is the issue, or the reaction that the chemical will bring forth? So if there's another process of the student learning the reaction without missing the chemical, would the student have lost something? So in other words, we must not only think about our curricula, bringing innovation, but also thinking about the processes of delivering that curricula, the experiments, the sessions. What are they focused on? Are we talking about activities because we have simply walked through tradition of, oh, students go to the lab, they mix chemical A and chemical B, and or is it because there's a competency that we have defined that needs to be gained? And we then can ask the question, if they cannot gain it by A, what are the alternative mechanisms to gain that same competency? So for me, you must begin to think around curricula and talk about the innovations about the delivery, not simply going through the route of activities upon activities, but focus on the competency. Number 3, one of the beauties around COVID-19 and the challenge is the potential it has given us in terms of monitoring the quality of our teaching activities and even the promptness, regularity of our teaching activities. Let me give you an example that had continued to excite me. We have started online teaching in University of Medical Sciences since about the end of March. And ordinarily, I can't go around to go to every class to listen to what teachers are teaching. Now they are recording. And they are all warehoused with the ICT. They are listening to students. Now I can pick samples of lectures of teachers to listen to exactly what they are teaching. I can listen to various things. I ask the question, are they teaching what they ought to teach? Is the teaching correct? I can set up my quality assurance team in a different way to take samples from every department. So it has given us the opportunity to be able to intently focus on the quality of what our teachers do and how well they are doing it. This is an amazing opportunity in terms of innovation for quality assurance in our educational system. It's something we must embrace and something that we must use to the best of the opportunities it has given us. The fifth issue is about, the fourth issue is about questionnaire assessment. Today, people are doing exams online. Of course, the question will come, what kind of assessment is possible? And why do we define assessment the way we define assessment? Again, in an argument I got into a couple of days ago, because we have been arguing this back and forth in my school. I asked the question, what's the purpose of assessment? To fail or to pass, or rather to use it as an instrument for learning? So why people are complaining, oh, we don't know if students are learning. And I'm like, why don't you give them assignment from time to time? That way you are ensuring that they are learning, and you are not waiting for one almighty October exam or June exam to determine if they fail or pass. Because the purpose of assessment is not just about letting people say fail or pass, but rather it should be a part of the learning. It should be part of the process of helping students to learn and to correct themselves when they fail. So I believe, again, we need to think around our innovation about assessment. Must we continue to insist, like some chemistry teachers used to insist in IFE, that students in part 1 must write, must answer long essays before? And I'm like, long essay in year 1, okay, so that what will happen? At the end of the day, we are asking the question, what exactly are we getting at? Are we looking at assessment as a part of learning? Are we thinking about the objectivity of those assessments? Are we thinking about the degree to which those assessments will cover the syllabus? All are those issues that we must begin to bring innovation on, including how can we do exams online and what exams can you do online? People are examining thesis online now in schools where there are progressive-minded approach. But there are very many schools where they are saying that won't happen until COVID-19 goes. So again, we must think around innovation about assessment. And there are many software that are now available for even assessment to monitor students' learning at home, to monitor students' examination at home. And so we must think about that. Number 5, which I think is one very philosophical issue that I'm very particular about, is about redefining teachers' role. People tell me, oh, well, the student didn't read the material. And I always ask them, who says they must read the materials? That the materials, you are not the only source of wisdom. So the idea about us pumping materials to students, force feeding them, so to say, is a philosophy that we have run for too many years. But rather, I believe strongly that part of what we must do is to redefine the teacher's role as a stimulant, a catalyst for learning, and allow the student to use the resources the teacher provides as simply a prompt to making the student to desire to learn more and to go out of the class scenario to explore mechanisms for innovative learning so that that student can become a lifelong learner and not somebody that reads books and just come and pour it back to us. And again, we must begin to think about what is the end product. A couple of years ago, I was involved in an interview, excuse me, of a young lady who was going to pick a job as a statistician in one university. This was, by all definition, a high flyer. If you look at the class she graduated with in a university, she was the best students in her undergraduate. She was the best students in her master's program. And then she came to this interview, and we simply asked her to explain some very basic principles, because we are going to bring her to teach medical students, and we wanted her to be able to explain to them processes, some of the reasons behind them. This young lady could not do any of this, and yet she was the best graduate student. So what went wrong? Very simple. She understands the process of force feeding, that what teachers do is they want to cram 10 courses of anemia, 20 courses of diarrhea, 30 courses of, and then they come back and they pour exactly the same for the teacher, who gives them excellent mark, but this student has not learned beyond cramming or taking in what she was force-fed with and regurgitating it at the time when it is required. That is not what we must do. We must bring innovation into what teachers' role is. We must change the dynamics of teachers' role. And that takes me to number 6, about shifting the learning paradigm from what is informative, in other words, knowledge level, to a transformative learning. Their students become people who use those learning to make changes across situations they encounter, and also they are able to use that learning to grow themselves and to grow the society. I'll talk about that a little bit in the next few minutes. I'm trying to keep my eye on my time. Okay, I think I still have like 10-15 minutes. If I'm going too long, please let me know. I think I should have 10-15 minutes. All right. Like I said, I'll come back to that in a moment with another slide. And then one of the opportunities I see is the opportunity, the innovation to change our recruitment base. Today, we have brick and mortar classrooms where teachers have to appear, but COVID-19 is changing that. One of the things I find exciting, for example, is that I'm talking to colleagues outside the country, UK, US, to come and be visiting lecturers. And they don't need to come to Nigeria. They don't need to leave their base. Now they can be part of our teaching staff just wherever they are. Do their teaching online, deliver it by Zoom, and do interaction by WhatsApp. And so we have a new opportunity to internationalize our teaching base and to expose our students to a wider base of teachers who can help them develop more robust understanding of whatever subject they are dealing with. So I think that if you think around this carefully, these are great opportunities for moving forward. Innovations in our delivery channel, innovation around our curricula, innovation around our monitoring of teaching and quality, innovations around our assessment, innovation about the traditional role of teachers and the evolving role of teachers, innovation in our learning philosophies, and also in our recruitment base. These 7 dimensions can change the face of medical education if we will embrace them. Let me quickly, because in a minute or two, explain this issue around informative and transformative learning. There are 3 levels of learning we can take students through. One very common one is the informative one, where what we are focusing on is information and skill, so that, well, they become content experts in what they do. They can tell us the 30 causes of arrhythmia, if need be, and things like that. And they can examine students. But our students, as particularly medical education, are people who have leadership role in society. And therefore, as we prepare them, we must prepare them in the post-COVID-19 era with a different mindset. Beyond informative is informative, where values and ethics become stronger. And we are beginning to come to that as a big challenge now, where you see people, the way they communicate, the way they speak to their patients, it's just appalling. I was involved in a case a few weeks back where a parent was very disturbed by the child had to be taken to emergency in the private hospital and referred to a teaching hospital. And I called the person, I won't talk about the rank, who was supposed to be in charge. I was like, oh, well, it cannot be that important. That patient cannot be that sick if that's the symptom. And I'm like, excuse me, a patient who went on emergency to a private hospital, referred to a teaching hospital, and you sat down in your house without stepping out, and you're telling me it cannot be that serious. That person may be a content expert, but in professionalism, that person ranks very low. And so we must educate our students, we must move them away from just level of information and skill to the issue of values, ethics, of what it is to be truly a professional within the medical education sector. But ultimately, where we want them to be is the transformative level of learning, where they assume leadership role, not just within their profession, but in their society, where they speak for issues, where they are change agents, where they advocate for things. Because being doctors is a very privileged position, and we must train our doctors to be able to truly play leadership role in their society. And that must be true, particularly within our sector as Christian medical doctors. So, as we then talk around these innovations, I believe that these innovations end up with the question, how do we get there? For me, I think the issue is about key priorities, because we cannot continue to do the same thing the same way and expect that we'll get different results. And so some key priorities as we go forward, 4 of them. Number 1 is about giving priority attention to our teachers' role and performance. And so what should we be looking at? More than ever before, we must evaluate constantly and continuously. What does the teacher teach? Number 2, how does the teacher teach what he's supposed to teach? Number 3, how faithful is that teacher in coming to class? Does he delegate all his teaching to the senior resident, or does he come to class when he ought to come to class? And finally, having taught the class, what is the quality of that teacher's assessment? Because assessment is also part of teaching. I believe that if you give a lot of priority to this in the post-COVID-19 era, we'll be changing the face of medical education. The number 2 issue, before I move to number 2, sorry, I just want to remind us of this. This is a quote from Professor Basafunwa, who used to be a Dean of Education in Ife and later Minister of Education in Nigeria. It says, no education system can rise above the quality of its teachers. And that is why we must give power to our teachers, not only about their competence in subject matter, but also their competence in delivery and their integrity of doing what is right continuously with their teaching. William Otto Ward says the mediocre teacher tells, the good teacher explains, the superior teacher demonstrates, but the great teacher does far more than that. It does more than telling, it does more than explaining, it does more than demonstrating. It inspires the student to truly want to learn and to put the learning to use of society and of his patient. That is what all of us in medical education must aspire to be, great teachers who inspire lifelong learning. Number 2 issue we must think about priority is we must refocus our institutional philosophies. And I like this quote from Chenetor. I think it's just clearly the way I would like to say it. That training institutions must broaden their traditional role as places where people go to obtain information, e.g. consulting book in libraries or listening to expert faculty members, to becoming places that incorporate novel forms of learning that transcend the confines of the classroom. Learning cannot, must not, and should not be restricted to our classroom. It must be the starting point, not the end point of learning. We must think around our educational philosophy, our institutional philosophy, to make sure that that changes. And part of that changing is about how we assess students. I often tell the story about what happened to me in year 1 of medical school. I haven't gone to I went to local school, and oftentimes you don't have teachers, so you have to learn. You have to read on your own to pass. And I came to Ife, and year one, I found teachers dictating notes, something I was not very used to in my school because I didn't have many teachers. I only have a few of them that dictate notes. And I did what I've always done in school, in my secondary school, buy textbook and read on my own. Only to go to the exam, and I found that a teacher was taking the question directly from his notes and putting dash and dash, like you would say, like John went to dash, so that dash happened. Meanwhile, I have not read John went to dash in my textbook. I've read around the subject, I have mastered the subject as far as I know, only to come to the class and perform poorly because the teacher was restricting me to what he said in his note, exactly how he said it. And of course, I learned my lesson. I stopped reading textbook to gain knowledge. I started reading teachers' note to pass exam. And that is part of the reason why we must reorder, refocus our institutional philosophies. Classroom are simply one place to stimulate the beginning of learning, not to constrain students to learning. Our role cannot be, our school in 21st century, in post-COVID era, cannot just be the place people, the only place people can come for information to pass or to become, or to listen to teachers to pass. No, it must be the beginning point in trying to get our students to become life learners. Number 3, we must promote all-person teaching agenda. Like President Roosevelt said, to educate a person in mind and not in moral is to educate a menace society. The ethics of the professions, the whole issue around integrity, and particularly for those of us who are Christian doctors, who are Christian teachers, are things we cannot sacrifice on the platform of just teaching. Because when we teach, we must think about who this person is and take the opportunity to teach as an opportunity to transform the lives of our students. And medical education must be to transform lives so that people can go out and again, they can then have a multiplier effect of transforming life. That we must promote. It's the whole person teacher agenda, where we bring strongly the whole issue around ethics, values, integrity, and all that to prepare professionals for the 21st century. The fourth element is making the right investment. Without the right investment, we cannot get the right results. So we must make investment in our teacher competencies and their pedagogical skills. We must train our teachers. We must invest in their ability. We must invest in their continued professional development so that they can be at the top of their skill. And we individually, as teachers, must make it a priority to also invest in our own life, in our own competencies, in our own skills, and our own professional development. We must take every opportunity to be the best we can. I always remind myself that it was said of Daniel chapter 6, verse 4 to 5, that they could find him not only not corrupt, but they could not find him, he was not corrupt, but he was also not negligent. You know, he was a skillful teacher. The Bible says that David led Israel with the integrity of his heart and the skillfulness of his hand. So as teachers, as Christian teachers, skillfulness was the part of the issues we focus on very strongly in our life. The other thing we must make the right investment in is to invest in teaching and training support resources, the regular technical resources, the learning platform to improve teaching, to improve research, to improve services. And we must invest in the training environment that is safe, supportive for optimal learning, and stimulating for innovation. I'll be rounding up now about 2 minutes. The fifth issue is about leadership. I had the last person before me talk a little bit about leadership, but I want to emphasize that leadership is ultimately the catalyst that brings results. You can have the human resources, you can have the facilities and the physical resources, you can have the governance structure. Without the right leader, we will get it wrong. And therefore, you must continue to invest in building leadership capacity and supporting people who are visionary to take leadership position rather than people who are self-serving and who wants position so that they can take glory in that position. Particularly, we must promote that within the Christendom, that we must, as God gives us opportunity, take it as an opportunity to bring value, to bring the hand of God upon our institutions and upon the affairs that we have opportunity to pretend over. So I want to finalize with 2 slides. 1, let's remember this. Health and the health profession is all about people. Thus, the core driving purpose of professional education must be to enhance the performance of the health system for meeting the needs of patients and populations in an equitable and efficient manner, not to boast of who we are and not to simply fight for our own rights alone, but to think about the patients out there, the population that needs us, and to enhance the system to make sure that it can meet their needs better. I like to question as he talk around the education of health professionals in the 21st century. He said that education of health professionals in the 21st century must focus less on memorizing and transmitting facts and more on promotion of the reasoning and communication skills that will enable the professional to be an effective partner, facilitator, advisor, and advocate. This is what our focus must be in the post-COVID-19 era. All the innovations we think about must dovetail in building, developing, supporting professionals who truly will be effective partners, facilitators, advisors, and advocates for the system and for the people, and to make sure that this work to improve the health in our nation. I want to thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. I turn it back to
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord.
Hallelujah.
Praise the Lord. This very interesting has done justice to do more. I know he has to cut. We are supposed to have another. I think I'm told that we will leave that aspect and then take questions from what our brother had just said. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Hospitals with Bro Kevin anchoring, but I'm told that we need to maybe postpone that one and then go into questions and to ask questions. Our brother is still in online on what he had just spoken. I think he was so detailed, so we can take questions from him since we cannot finish the other one. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Hallelujah.
Okay, good evening. Okay, there's a question. Someone was asking, how do you handle issues of getting injured during your line of duty? Give a succinct example with the period we're in. So someone gets infected with COVID-19 while in the line of duty. And you now realize that you are actually on your own to take care of yourself and your family without adequate institutional support. So this is a serious factor that is very discouraging and making frontline physicians to make up their minds to reduce their commitments. So the person is now asking, so what's your advice? How do you handle such issues? Yes, I think this question was directed at Dr. Ifomamwe.
Hello. Yes. Good evening, brethren, beloved of the Lord. I want to thank you for that question. And I think that is a question that everyone will benefit from looking at the answer. I'm very happy that Prof, who just spoke, is here with us because he is a VC. So he is in management. And I'll be glad if he can also weigh in his thoughts on this. But from the viewpoint of you being the clinician and being thrown out into the deep, as it were, I think that we need to begin with first things first, self-care. Make sure that you are completely protected. I mean, and somebody may argue, what if I'm not given face masks in where I work? What if I don't have face shields? What if I don't have PPE? It is important, like we shared earlier, that you stay up to date with your knowledge about COVID. And the WHO has a fascinating side that, and of course, NCDC as well, where up-to-date stuff is being talked about. I know there's a lot of misgivings about research and what the research really we should we believe, and are they skewed for political reasons, global political reasons. But I think we're all doctors in the first and foremost, so we know how to draw the line. First of all, self-care, look after yourself. Make sure you are well covered. Don't take anything for granted. And where there is a pandemic, everyone is suspect. Everyone you see is positive until proven otherwise. Don't say, oh, it doesn't look well, it's not febrile. Fever is not always there. So let us please take care of ourselves first before we go into the war zone. If you see any of your colleagues being careless, don't think it is their business, because if they get infected, you will get, God forbid you won't get infected, but it will affect everyone who walks around them, and they will all go into quarantine, 14 days of worrying. And unfortunately, some people then turn out that they also caught it. So look after each other. That's the next thing. So first of all, self-care. Next thing, look after each other at work. If things are really bad, like some places where there are no masks provided, no face shield, whatever, please get together as a group and discuss how you can look after yourselves. So it may be that you say, okay, you know what, guys, we're going to meet management and have a chat to them. We need to be protected. And while management is still making up their mind, in the meantime, get together and purchase for yourselves face masks and face shields and whatever aprons you need to wear to see your patients. And of course, make sure that you set out the stage for safety anyway. So it's not business as there's a new normal of consultations now. First of all, virtual consultations. So if you're not doing that yet, ask your people to think about it. And then when they come face to face, to have the 6 feet distance with the door open. You have to rearrange your consulting rooms. Those who are in accident and emergency, you can still look at what is happening and rearrange your space. Do what you must do first of all. And unfortunately, yes, some people will catch it. Your hospital, I hope this is the time that people can get together, whether it's ARD or MDCN, or if it's not in any of these categories, staff unions in all organizations can get together to actually preempt this situation and discuss and say, what do we do should this happen to any of us? So this is a conversation that must be had now. And I thank you so much for raising it, because this is a very topical situation that can happen at any time to anyone. And so this is a time to begin to put pressure on your management that there is something about looking after your staff, and come up with the solution and present it to them. And as you're going, please, I can't overemphasize the need for prayer in everything you do. The hearts of the kings are in the hands of the Lord, and turns it whichever way he wills. So let God go ahead of you and prepare the hearts of your management. And as you get together to show leadership among yourselves and to come up with a solution and tell it to your management, I'm sure that you'll be halfway done with solving the problem. It's always a difficult thing when staff members say, oh, it's management business, not my business. No, one day that will be a business that you need to contend with. So you help management to help you. And I think you can meet together in the middle. I would want to ask if Prof Prof
Okay.
can help us.
All right. Thank you very much, man. There's very little to add. I think, you know, I currently I am the chair for interministerial committee for COVID response in Ondo State, and so this issue becomes very pertinent to me. Okay, you want me to start my video now? I understand. Okay, now this issue is very pertinent. You know, I think the most important thing is don't let us think or see it as it's management as a source. Every responsible management should provide. But believe me, even if management is not providing everything, I believe that it is in my own best interest. Sorry, I will use an example some people will not agree, but I'll use it. Management does not buy clothes for me, for example, or buy shoes for me. Okay. When I go to work, I don't go to work naked. You know, for me, when it comes to this COVID-19 era, things like protective are as good as my pass as my clothes. I will try to do my best to get mine. We must pressurize management, we must converse with them. But believe me, if this happens and something happens to you, it's going to end up being, God forbid, you and your family. So I think that it makes sense for all of us to say, look, we will pressurize management to do it. And number two, we will ensure that collectively we have a protocol that we all adhere to, and we are all looking out for one another. Because, like you said, I've seen that in the teaching hospital in Ondo now. We had the entire workforce in that duty and that quarantine. So let's don't always let us believe that our safety is in the hand of somebody else. It's first and foremost in our hand. And it's there in the hand on our hands, of course, in the God's hand. But don't let's say it's in the management hand. I think that for me, that's very important. But management must do what it can, but we must always go the extra leg if we need to, so that we can be healthy and will not fall victim.
Thank you so much, Prof. Prof, I've written you a direct message, private message. Please look at it. We need to continue. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I think there are a number of questions in the chat box. I think I'll just take in one of them. Again, I think there's a question here that says, my question is with respect to this new normal and perhaps the need for a paradigm shift. How ready are we? So the person is asking, how do we balance quality of delivery versus meeting the immediate need? So, okay.
Is that to me or to her?
I think the question is directed to you, Prof.
I need to understand that question more, because I don't see a gap between meeting the immediate need and ensuring quality, because that seems to be the question. Because if we talk about the immediate, we must be careful not to make the urgent the enemy of the most important. Sometimes in terms of saying we are responding privately, we are responding urgently, we compromise quality. And to always come back to us, quality always costs less ultimately. So I think that we should always focus on quality, even while we are doing the immediate. Because sometimes when it comes to things like COVID-19, why people get into trouble is because they respond in an emergency mode. Just to go back to the last question we had, you know, somebody comes, is dyspneic, and then you want to respond very quickly without thinking about your protection, about the quality of, you're going to expose yourself. So I think that yes, emergency will always happen, but a quality mindedness will help us to minimize compromises. There will be times when we will not be able to do the very, very 100%, but when we have quality minded, the likelihood that we would compromise quality significantly will also be much lesser. I hope I answered the question. Maybe I need to get more. I need to get more from that question.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Yes, you did. Thank you very much. I hope the person that asked that question is satisfied. Okay, the other question is Is that someone said, thank you, sir. It is good to know someone is thinking this way. How do you advise the older teachers to adopt this new way of education?
So I'm sorry, I like to laugh a lot. So that was the first thing. Let me tell you how to help older teachers. You know, the older teachers, one of the things I found about older teachers is that they have a high sense of responsibility. What they lack often is the technological know-how, but they have a high level of commitment. So what to do sometimes is to get a younger person to work with them. Let me tell you what we did in our institution very practically. We started by training everybody. We did not assume anybody knows how to use any of those things. So our ICT set time to teach every group. You know, we have service of teaching online for assignments. So even the older teachers, I was surprised that a number of them became very excited about that possibility, and they are cashing on. But you can support them. So our ICT team supports them to say, Prof, if you have a big issue, please let me know. And sometimes even me, I walk around to some of the old Prof and say, Prof, can I help you with one or two things? So I think that conversing with them is important and giving them their respect. When you do, I found the older teachers very, very respectful, when you are very respectful to them, and they are willing to do their bit. So you must recognize their limitation, and you must support them so that their strength can come out and their weaknesses can be minimized. It sometimes will take a long time to persuade some of those teachers. And when you are facing bricks, what you do is you give them less lectures and you give more lecture to people who can deliver it on the kind of platform you like. That way you can balance this out.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very, very, very much, sir. I'm glad to know that at least the older teachers also are catching up. Okay, there's another question. How can we pursue online teaching innovation in our universities without solving the power challenges in the country, sir?
Sir, good question. My answer to that is this. If you're going to wait to solve the power challenges, we will never move from where we are. I want to believe that a number of us on this platform, we don't wait for NEPA. We don't only wait for whatever they are called, BDC or NEPA. That's the truth. Because sometimes if you don't begin to tackle these issues, we'll stay at the same point, offering, what's the word now? Excuses. There are enough excuses for not to do anything. It's not as if in my school there's light all the time. No. So what we decided to do is to say, how do you maximize your resources? So for example, I said to them, for you to record your lectures, for example, we're going to create, from this time to this time, the generator will always be working. So that way we can maximize our resources and make sure that people can do that at that point in time. There are times when, and now we are beginning to do inverters, and I think that it's when we decide that we're going to do it, the willingness to do it must first be there, then we tackle the challenges. But if you are waiting for perfect conditions to be, then nothing will change. Our country will remain the way it is, medical economy will remain the way it is. So we must bring our innovation of solving problems to solve those problems, because at our individual levels, we are solving those problems. So let's use those same innovation to solve it as institutional. I'm not saying use your money to buy a generator for the hospital. I'm simply saying the same issue we can bring to the management to say, you know what, can we get one just inverter for this classroom? And all of us can use it to record. That's what we are doing. We are doing limited hours to provide generator light when there is no NEPA, and then we are beginning to bring inverter to play with when we are doing our recording. So that's the way we are trying to solve it, and I think everybody can solve it that way.
All right, thank you very much, sir. We have a 2-in-1 question, which will be the final, sir. The first part of the question is, what is the role of medical students in innovations in medical education, especially in public universities who are almost at the mercy of the system? And the second part is, in training, generally in Nigeria, it's considered that the harshness, like you pointed out, is part of the entire medical training, both for the students and for the residents. So that's the way we perceive that. So
let me start with the second one. You know, those things are things that we we used to think were normal, but they are not normal. We know they are not normal. And except we all speak with the same voice about this issue, it's an abuse. The fact that I came to medical school does not mean that you must disgrace me, you must make me feel as if I'm worth nothing. No, it's pulling down. I mean, particularly sometimes you are in the world, you have the nursing students are there, other students are there, then you talk to a medical student in a very degrading way. How do you expect others to respect him? We are all colleagues ultimately. So I think that those issues, when they happen, we must set up mechanism where particularly senior people can take action. Even the senior professors, somebody was able to call in and say, Prof, that was not good enough. It is because we have never been speaking against it. The student cannot speak loud, yes, I agree, but the student must set up mechanisms. That's one of the things I was talking about, that look, there must be governance mechanism that help us to monitor what happens. And technology gives us the opportunity for me to see interactions that happen even where I am. And we must be ready to redress those issues. It's because they are not redressed, they are not addressed, they are not spoken about, that those continue. The role of students are innovation. I think that students are the prime innovator movers. I think that it's unfortunate that many times we have not given our students the platform to show all they can do, because really they know more about technology than most of us. They are more innovative minded than most of us. So what can students do in public university where nobody wants to listen to them? A couple of things. Number one, organize yourself into a club, and as a club begin to roll out activities around that shows innovation. Believe me, somebody will take note because you are doing it. Number two, every time you have the opportunity to make a contribution, make that contribution that shows that you have a potential for innovation. When somebody hear you once, hear you twice, hear you 3 times, and you think that this guy always brings some nice idea, believe me, that person will be forced to recognize you and to want to talk to you. So I think for me, we must, it's a pity that our students are not being given enough platform. If you look at the world, those who are changing the world are graduate students everywhere. I mean, how did WhatsApp start? How did the Zoom start? How did what's the word? Microsoft, where was it? Let's go to start. So everybody, the world changes because the young people are at the forefront of it. When we don't give them that platform, we are shooting ourselves in the leg. We are denying ourselves the opportunity to tap into the richness of their ability. So I think that we must continuously give our students an opportunity and a platform to talk. And our students must also conduct themselves in a way that will make others want to give them a platform. Permit me, I'll close with one example. A few weeks ago, a student body asked that they wanted to meet with me. And I said, yes, come. And they were come to my office, and lo and behold, almost like 30 people came from all kinds of places in those states. All kinds of people. NAS, this, that. And I said to myself, there's no way I'm going to give you a platform to come and meet with me again because you breach confidentiality. I gave you an appointment. You went to bring people from all kinds of places that I didn't know about, and you didn't have the courtesy to tell me about it. No, when students behave that way, they also shut themselves out of reckoning. So students must also conduct themselves in a way that will make the most senior people give them the reckoning and give them the platform. But other people must give younger people the platform because they are not just tomorrow, they are future even today, moving the dial to a greater level. So that's my answer to that. Just to mention, I didn't see your message, Madam Brookfield Center. I saw I'm trying to find your message. I haven't seen it, but if I see, I'll respond, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Okay. So you will see the message from Brookfield Center for Lifestyle Medicine. You won't see it from my name.
Oh, okay. I'm scrolling now. I will look for it, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
It's a private message to you from Brookfield Center for Lifestyle Medicine.
Okay,
ma'am.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm sorry. I thought that was the last question, but it seems that we have a lot of people who are following from YouTube. So I'll just take one question from their own section, and they just actually reached us as regards it. So the question is, Since everything ultimately is affected by leadership and the government of the nation, what can we do if our leadership is not interested in improving things in the institutions? And how much innovation can we actually leverage upon in a traditional educational system that is naturally uncomfortable with new thinkings?
Wow, what a question. Can I ask you to repeat it one more time? That's a very interesting question. So I can catch all the dimensions. Yes.
All right, sir. Since everything is ultimately affected by leadership and the government of a nation, what can we do if if our leadership is not interested in improving things in the institutions? And how much innovation can one actually leverage on in a traditional educational system that is naturally uncomfortable with new thinking?
Okay. All right. Thank you. I get it now. I think that again, we must be careful not to take positional leadership as all that is to leadership. All of us are leaders in our own right. And I always tell people, let's look at the biggest picture. Start from where you are. If I light a candle where I am, and you light a candle where you are, our candle we add together to a circle of greater light. And therefore, yes, the government is not getting it right. There's no doubt about that. But if you and I will wait for government to change things before we change, nothing will change. But you are head of the department. Why don't you change your department? Why don't you change so that you can show innovation in your department? You are a consultant. You are a member of a unit. Why don't you show in your own clinic innovation? You are a student. Why don't you show in your circle? I think that for me, that's what we must begin to look at leadership. Leave the leader, other people alone. In your own circle of influence, you show leadership, you show innovation, and it is as we show innovation in small places that can add up on over time to big innovations. I don't think we should just wait for the larger innovation to happen before it happens, because there's always opportunity for innovation every day. Innovation is simply about thinking differently, doing things differently to achieve a better result. And I think all of us are capable of doing that, and we must do that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. At this juncture, I'll be handing over to the moderator. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, thank you for this. I think there are more questions, sir, for you, but we cannot because you just raised a lot of concerns that actually all of us are interested in. I know that in my school, they wanted to do an online exam, and we just start getting plenty messages. In fact, call from government, Rivers State University, call from government that we shouldn't start because there are students have already organized themselves to riot, that they are in the villages. That in their villages, they don't have network, they don't have light, some of them don't have money to buy, some of them don't have money to buy laptop and all that. You know, those are concerns, and are real concerns as it regards the public institutions, you know, and that's why we are trying to, people are asking plenty questions.
Yes, sir, can I take that on that issue?
Okay,
if you don't mind.
Sir.
You know,
yes,
people raised that issue with me in my school, and I said, number one, who should drive the process? The students or the teachers? If you let every student to let his own wish drive the system, then why are you going to drive the system? Number one, the system needs to determine the vision and where it is going. And do you know many of those students who say they don't have money to buy data for lessons, have data to watch films online and to chat with their girlfriends? So sometimes about priorities, that their parents send them to school. Now they're not in school, they're at home. The money they will have given them to come to school. So that money is available or should be available.
Yes.
So because the lesson is continued, the schooling is continued. So that's the schooling now. And the other thing we need to point out that we often forget to point out is this. The time they are wasting is far costlier. Our students don't realize that you waste 1 month, you waste 2 months of your life, the cost is beyond measure. So you are talking about the cost of being stagnant for 5, 6, 9 months. to the cost of buying data, you must help them to see that cost analysis in the right perspective. Otherwise, we be in trouble by students. And as you know, it's only few students that cause riot, not majority.
Yes.
The
Yes.
majority are silent. And that's what we must also get our strength to do. The majority suffer because they stay silent. When they should make their own voice loud and hard. CMDA students, for example, must be loud about what is right. That's one of the things you must do. You cannot be silent and then let those who don't want progress run your life and ruin your life for you. No, you must get to speak about what we believe in and do what we believe.
Thank you very much.